Hello again everyone, welcome back. This is video number 2 in the series of me talking through some of the things that I think actually will be quite useful for you on a home lab, test lab, whatever sort of lab you want to build. And we're going to start off by running through, in this video, the little Dell, the R320 that I showed you in the pile in the last video, which I will link somewhere up here. Maybe, and just going to give you a run through of the server as it is now, what I'm going to do to the server in terms of upping its current specification, hard disks, network cards, etc., etc., and what we're going to try and do with it, and why I think this sort of server actually is quite beneficial. Some of the pros, some of the cons, some of the caveats you do have to be aware of with second-hand enterprise gear, especially with servers, and all the fun that goes with them. So without further ado, let's have a look at this server. And here we are, server number 1. This is the Dell PowerEdge R320. This is one of the servers that I picked up off the pile. I've chosen to start with this one for you guys purely and simply because it's a simple little server. They're very common, very easy to get your hands on. First thing to be aware of, 2 main chassis with this server. This one is the server chassis that has the 2.5-inch bays, so fits 2.5-inch drives in the front. As you can see, this one missing 3 caddies because it came with no discs. It's very rare actually for a second-hand server to come with caddies, especially all of them, because a lot of the time the data goes off for destruction, the server gets sold off second-hand. You can see it also comes with blanking plates. You cannot fit hard disks in these blanking plates. So again, just be aware when you are looking at servers like this, that if you see these in the front of it, they are not caddies, they are blanking plates. You will need to buy caddies, which will add to the cost, but if you get the server cheap enough, the caddies aren't the most expensive part, so it's not the end of the world. They're easily accessible everywhere. There's clones and there's second-hand ones, because so many of these servers out there that there's so many caddies left over. Now, on the front, standard Dell PowerEdge, power button, ID button, blue ID, that's for if you're in a data center and you're guiding someone to it. 2 USB ports, there is an LCD screen here which will appear when we power it up, menu for the LCD screen, front VGA port, i.e. so again, the front VGA on servers like this is designed so that when it's in a rack in a data center, if you need to do some maintenance on it, you bring along a KVM cart, you plug the monitor in there, you plug the keyboard and mouse in there, and you can access the server. That simple. That's the only reason it's there. You don't need to use it. There's one on the back, and we'll go to that later. Obviously, I'm going to fill this with 2.5-inch drives. Well, not fill, but we will have some 2.5-inch drives. And I've got the caddies to go with it, so we'll get to fitting them shortly. But what we will do while we're here is pop the lid, which, nice and simple. I'm going to do this one-handed because I can, like so. We'll put that down out of the way, and this is the inside of one of the many variants of a Dell R320. First thing that stands out, obviously, this is the single CPU version. The second socket is non-existent. Now, there are versions of this server that have 2 CPUs and 1 CPU. Obviously, if they were supplied from the factory with a single CPU, they didn't bother putting a second socket on because it was an option. You could option this to have the second socket in place, but not be populated. But a lot of the times, these were cheap servers. Single CPU, single setup of memory, not a lot else in there. So just to cover from the front, we've got the back plane, fans. Again, because this is the single CPU one, you get a fan blank. If this was a dual CPU one, there would also be a fan here. These fans are not hot swap, as you can see, because they are actually cabled in. We've got the RAID controller back here for the SAS RAID controller. Nothing populated at the moment, but as you can see from the side here, we've got 1 times PCI 16 slot, 1 times PCI 8 slot, and down here on certain servers, you will also get the dedicated iDRAC card, which gives it its own, it takes up this bottom slot here, and it gives it its own iDRAC network slot, which is the integrated diagnostic remote access controller from Dell. That's what Dell use for onboard management. Currently we've got, I think, 2 gig or 2 gig DDR3 ECC memory DIMMs, they're coming out. Nice flashy orange light because I've only got 1 power supply plugged in, and just because I can reach over the back, VGA, network card plugged in, that's it. Not a lot else in there. Very basic server. Xeon E5 underneath there. Not a lot really more to say on this. This is a very basic, cheap to run entry-level server, and will do pretty much anything that we need it to do for what we need. Again, just be aware, if you want something that is going to have a high CPU requirement, you may want to look for you may want to guarantee that your system has 2 sockets, but even with a single socket, this supports the E5 V1 and V2 Xeon processors, so plenty of choice, cheap CPUs, plenty of availability for those, no issue. DDR3 ECC memory, again, fairly easy to get hold of, reasonably cheap, not the end of the world. So what I'm now going to do, with a little bit of time just to save you waiting, I'm going to rack up the caddies, rack up the memory that I've got for this. We're going to stick 64 gig of RAM in this server, stick a 4-port NIC in the back, little 1 gig one, and actually get this server loaded, running, idling, and you can then hear the noise it makes, because again, 1U servers do tend to be a bit noisy, but these actually not too bad. So join me again when it's running. Hard disks installed. Now next step is to get it fired up. Going to give this server, probably going to be running Hyper-V. So this is Windows Server 2022. We'll give it a go. We'll see what happens. We've now got 64 gig of RAM to play with, and also going to see, obviously, at the moment, let's have a quick look. So this server is off, but at idle consumes 7 watts. So at some point in this, I'll do some calculations and we'll work out how much this is actually using. But that's the server, not powered on, but with its power plugged in. So that is the baseboard management controller. So the actual motherboard on this with its remote management, even when this server is off, uses 7 watts continuously. So again, this is one of the things with enterprise gear that you do need to be aware of. It's not the most power efficient as such compared to things like desktop machines, because in a data center they're not too fussed. But on the flip side, you want something to be fairly power efficient, especially if you're going to leave it on 24/7 running whatever you decide to run on it. So let's just see. I haven't turned this thing on since installing the memory and the hard disks, so we will press the power button and up it spins. Pretty lights, and we get configuring memory. And I'll probably fast forward through this bit. As you can see, we've got replaced parts because it picked up that I've upgraded the memory. Whereas it had a pair of 2 gigs in previously, it now has a 416 gigs. Okay, now we're in the BIOS, and as you can hear, the server is reasonably noisy. Some of this will quiet down once we plug the second power supply in, but we'll deal with it as it is for the time being. Again, things that are always worth checking, because we'll be using Server 2022, we need to make sure that the boot mode is in UEFI. Oh, no, go back. The BIOS on this is already fully up to date. A correction that I need to make, and I will go back and edit earlier is that the supported CPUs in this unit, I've just had a quick look, is the E5 1400 series and 2400 series. The highest core count CPU you can fit in here is a 10 core 20 thread CPU, which is the E5 2470 V2 CPU. That is compatible, which in all honesty will probably achieve pretty much anything you want to anyway. The one that's in here, this 1410, is a quad core hyper threaded processor, so 4 cores 8 threads, but at some point I'll acquire a 2470 and take this up to its maximum. Everything else is pretty much per default settings, other than making sure that your security settings, I've already, on this one, I've turned the TPM on. TPMs around this time on this age servers were optional. They didn't all come with them. Again, it's another configuration thing from the factory that not every Dell server has a TPM. Unfortunately, short-sightedness by some people, didn't order them with them. This one has one, so great. All on and working. So, finish that. iDRAC will come to it in a later video. There's plenty of others out there. But until that time, let's go and configure some RAID. First things we need to do, with any system of Dell's perk system, you have to convert any hard disks you plug in, so it would be RAID capable if you're running the RAID controller in this mode. So we'll go through 6 240GB SSDs. Yes, we'll confirm that. Okay. And we want to create a new virtual disk. And I want this to be RAID 5. RAID 5 for solid state disks is fine. RAID 5 for spinning disks is not. So, solid state disks please. Check all. I will have all of those disks please. And virtual disk 1. And we'll turn on disk caching and create virtual disk. And that will give us about 1 terabyte of space. And there's no virtual disks left, so we'll give it a second to create those disks. Go into manage, and there we go. So one RAID 5. Currently using right through cache with no read ahead. Don't have any options to change, so I can't change them. That's fine. And the array is ready. I can do a fast initialize if I want to. I'm not too fast. I don't need to initialize this drive. And now I'm going to attempt to install Windows. So you can join me either at an error screen shortly, or hopefully at a Windows Server 2022 boot screen. Catch you in a minute. we're back, and as you can see we have a Server 2022 desktop. I've been through, installed all the updates, brought it up to date. Interestingly, not a lot actually to find driver wise. If anything, Windows has installed all the drivers it's happy with. There's not much else going on. There's no unknowns. We've got everything in. Something that will probably be upgraded later on when I do the processor is the RAID controller card, just because the controller card that comes with this unit, which is the PERC H310 Mini, isn't the greatest at dealing with RAID 5. Doesn't give the best performance by any stretch of the imagination, so we'll probably upgrade that at some point to a H710, which I'll go through with you when I've got one. But other than that, everything else is here. We've got drives, we've got processors, we've got ports, we've got TPM, we've got everything. So currently I have pick you up and take you over to here. I've plugged in both power supplies now, just to quieten the things down and to get an accurate reading. And as you can see, it fairly evenly balances the power out over the two. We're dealing with, what's that, 50, 88 watts. So currently at idle, this system is drawing 88 watts. That's just this unit here. I've also got the there you go, 84 watts according to the onboard management. So a system like this, sat running all the time, is pulling 84 watts at idle. That is with zero load. So something to factor in over that. So let's, using trusty Cinebench, hit the magic go button, and we'll see what we can stretch that up to. Now, as you can see and hopefully hear a bit, fans are just starting to wind themselves up. We'll see if we get underway. I've not run this before, so let's have a quick look. So we've got 120 watts, no, 130 watts there, so 70 plus, yeah, so 130 watts being pulled. This the baseboard is a bit slow to catch up, does it in jumps. Now while it's just going through, I say it's not the quickest, it's only an 8-thread CPU in here. Just some information from my opinion on if you're looking at doing this sort of thing. We'll go into the later generation HPs in the next video with and as a comparison to see how much less power, if any, it draws. I haven't tested it yet. What are we at now? There you go, 126 watts. Fans are starting to wind up a bit more. To keep power to the utmost minimum, I went with solid state disks. One of my opinions is solid state disks now are cheap enough that for lab use, for things like that, you should be using them. Yes, spinning disks, you get greater capacity, but for power, for speed, where you do not need crazy capacity, so where you're not building a NAS box, things like that, where it's capacity and not speed, solid state the lot. SSDs in everything. The only time I ever use a spinning disk now is for CCTV and backup NASes. Everything else is solid state. Hence I've kept with this one, and all the servers I'm building in these videos will be solid state. It also, again, believe it or not, they use a lot less power, they generate a lot less heat, a lot less noise. You haven't got 6 disks spinning away, or 8 if you rack the server up fully. So it's that sort of thing. What are we up to? 126 watts still. And just to corroborate that, yeah, still 130 watts actual pull. And you add the two together, and we're underway. Nearly done. Again, this isn't a massive workhorse yet. I'll go through when I get a new CPU, new RAID card for this, and we'll actually get this up to something a bit more sort of potential available to this. But as an entry-level lab server using enterprise kit, this is now running the latest version of Windows. There's no drivers that it isn't compatible with. It will have Hyper-V running on it and be running VMs on it, no problem. So I give to you the Dell R320 as a potential, maybe for your home lab. This setup with the memory, with the hard disks that are in it, we've got 6 240 gig solid states, plus the server, has probably cost about £400, maybe a bit less, but in fact probably a bit less, to be honest. The caddies as well. Now this is fairly typical of one of these servers, but this will enable you to run virtual machines, run firewalls, run servers, run Docker containers, absolutely anything on here without breaking the bank. But this will carry on doing this now for years. If you had gone for the generation before this, the R310, you're going to hit problems. Same with any of the 11th gen series of servers. Anything with the old X and E series Xeons are just not worth your money. Don't buy them. They are not worth it. Go newer, spend a tiny bit more money, and I know that is difficult for some of you, but it pays dividends in lifetime of kit. People are still trying to, basically, in my opinion, fleece people out of money for really old kit, and that's just not worth it. You can get some cracking deals on this. So anyway, first run complete. Where are we? Right down low. Look at that, all the way down there. Slower than an 11th gen Core i7, which is not a surprise really. It's a baby Xeon. Hopefully we'll be able to get it further on up in some further videos once we start upgrading. But this is the start. This is the first server. This is just an R310. We're gonna go. I'll come back in further videos. Going to have a look at the 9th gen HP, just to get confusing, which we'll see what the next, because the 9th gen HP is the V3 V4 Xeon. It's the generation after this, and we'll do just a comparison, because between this and the Dell R120, they're very similar style servers. They're both single CPUs. They are both entry-level servers in their bracket, but we'll see how much more or less power it uses overall, how much quieter or noisier it is, and something that may suit your budget. So anyway, hopefully this has been useful to you. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you again in the next video. Please subscribe. So appreciative of people who do that, because it helps me to actually start to use the platform, start to use YouTube better. And again, if you are needing anything in the way of actual IT support, please get in contact with myself at Influx Solutions. We are here. We are based in the UK for all sorts of work that you need for your, whether you need IT support, whether you need wireless. Obviously we do Unify, we do Dell, we do all this stuff. So get in touch. Thank you for watching. Catch you again soon.